Commander Hyunwoo stared out at the endless black of space as his ship, the Crimson Dawn, suddenly lurched to a stop. The familiar blue glow of hyperspace faded away, replaced by the cold light of distant stars. They had arrived at System 2847C, just another dot on the Valaxian Empire's endless list of worlds to conquer. "Status report," Hyunwoo called out, settling back into his command chair. After 20 years of service, these scouting missions had become routine. Find a primitive world, catalog its resources, mark it for conquest. Simple as that. Lieutenant Yoonji, his trusted second-in-command, bent over her scanning console. Her fingers danced across the holographic displays as data streamed in from their sensors. "We have a Class M planet in the third orbital position, Commander," she announced, her voice carrying that familiar tone of boredom that came with routine missions. "Standard water-rich world with an oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, perfect for colonization." Hyunwoo nodded, already mentally preparing his report to the High Command. Another world ready for the Empire's expansion. The Valaxians had perfected this process over centuries. They would arrive at a primitive world, study its defenses, then return with a full invasion fleet. Most species barely had space travel, let alone the ability to resist the Empire's advanced technology. "Any signs of indigenous life?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. There was always life on these worlds, usually simple, peaceful creatures who had never seen war on the scale the Valaxians could bring. "Confirmed, Commander," Yoonji replied, adjusting her controls. "I'm detecting large population centers across multiple continents. Technology level appears to be early space age. They have some orbital installations and basic spacecraft." That was even better news. Early space age meant they were developed, enough to be useful as workers, but primitive enough to conquer easily. Hyunwoo turned to his tactical officer, Jin-ho, who sat at the weapons and scanning station. "Jin-ho, run a deep scan of their industrial capabilities," he ordered. "Command will want to know what kind of infrastructure we're working with." Jin-ho activated the ship's most powerful sensors, the ones capable of detecting individual manufacturing plants from light years away. These scans would reveal everything about the planet's industrial capacity, military strength, and resource production. It was information that would determine how many ships the Empire needed to send for a successful invasion. The bridge fell into its usual quiet rhythm as the crew worked. Communications officer So Young monitored radio transmissions from the planet, trying to decode their language. Navigator Sungmin plotted escape routes in case they encountered unexpected resistance. Everyone knew their job. But as minutes ticked by, Jin-ho's expression began to change. At first he looked puzzled, as if the scanner readings didn't make sense. He ran the scan again, checking his equipment for malfunctions. Then confusion gave way to concern, and concern slowly transformed into something that looked suspiciously like fear. "Commander," Jin-ho finally said, his voice tight with tension, "these readings, I don't think they can be correct." Hyunwoo straightened in his chair. In all his years of service, he had never heard that particular tone from his tactical officer. Jin-ho was a veteran, someone who had seen combat across a dozen worlds. Nothing should rattle him this easily. "What kind of readings?" Hyunwoo asked, standing and walking over to Jin-ho's station. The tactical officer gestured at his displays, where numbers and energy signatures flickered in patterns that hurt to look at. "The planet's surface is covered in industrial complexes. Commander, but not normal ones. These facilities are producing energy signatures I've never seen before." Hyunwoo studied the data, his trained eye trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The planet's continents were blazing with industrial activity. Massive manufacturing complexes stretched across entire land masses, their energy output so intense they were visible from space. Each individual facility was larger than anything in Valaxian space, and there were thousands of them. "This can't be right," Lieutenant Yoonji said, joining them at the tactical station. "These energy readings are higher than our greatest military and production centers. What kind of primitive species builds factories this size?" The bridge crew gathered around the displays, staring at readings that defied everything they knew about early space-age civilizations. The planet below wasn't just inhabited. It was transformed into something that looked more like a military installation than a living world. "Run the scan again," Hyunwoo ordered, though part of him already knew the results wouldn't change. and cross-reference these energy signatures with our military database. As Jin-Ho worked, the terrible truth began to emerge. The planet's inhabitants weren't primitive farmers or peaceful traders. They had turned their entire world into something the Valaxian Empire had never encountered before, something that made even their battle-hardened crew nervous. The scanner results came back identical. Below them lay a world that had perfected something the Valaxians had never even imagined possible. For 3 straight days, communications specialist So Young barely left her station. The radio chatter from the planet below never stopped. Thousands of transmissions flooded their receivers every hour, and each one she decoded made the situation more disturbing than the last. "Commander," she called out on the 3rd morning, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "I've been working on their language patterns. I think I understand what we're dealing with down there." Hyun-woo looked up from his morning reports, noting the dark circles under So Young's eyes. She had been pushing herself hard since they arrived, determined to crack the code of this mysterious world's communications. "What have you found?" So Young pulled up her translation matrix on the main screen. Lines of alien text scrolled past, with Valaxian translations appearing alongside. "They call their world Earth, Commander, but these aren't the communications of farmers or peaceful traders." She highlighted several transmission clusters, each one color-coded by content type. "Look at this pattern. Every major continent is coordinating massive production schedules, but it's not food production or civilian goods. They're manufacturing weapons, Commander. Weapons on a scale I've never seen before." The bridge crew gathered around as So Young continued her briefing. She had spent days categorizing the intercepted messages, and the picture that emerged was unlike anything in their military databases. "Here's a transmission from their northern continent," she said, playing an audio file. Strange alien voices filled the bridge, speaking in rapid, clipped tones. They're discussing delivery schedules for something they call kinetic orbital platforms. And this one from their southern regions talks about plasma rifle production quotas. Lieutenant Eunji frowned as she listened to the translations. "Plasma rifles? Commander, most civilizations don't develop plasma technology until they've been spacefaring for centuries. These beings barely have basic spacecraft." "It gets worse," So Young continued, pulling up more data streams. "I've intercepted communications from their educational institutions. They have entire universities dedicated to what they call weapons research and development. Not just military academies, Commander. Civilian schools where they teach children how to build better ways to fight." She opened another file, this one showing images captured from their entertainment broadcasts. The screen filled with scenes of combat, explosions, and warfare, but these weren't news reports or historical documentaries. They were shows created purely for entertainment. "This is their popular media," So Young explained, her voice growing more disturbed. "Movies, television programs, games, almost everything they create for fun involves combat scenarios. They don't just study warfare, Commander, they enjoy it." Navigator Sungmin, who had been quietly analyzing production data, suddenly spoke up. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by barely controlled anxiety. "Commander, I've been running calculations based on these intercepted manufacturing reports. The numbers don't make sense." He projected his analysis onto the main display, showing production figures that made the entire bridge crew fall silent. According to their own communications, this single planet produces more weapons-grade materials in one standard day than most civilizations in our database manufacture in an entire year. The implications hit everyone at once. This wasn't just an advanced civilization. This was something entirely beyond their experience. "Show me their cities," Commander Hyun-woo ordered, though part of him dreaded what he might see. Lieutenant Eunji activated their long-range visual scanners, focusing on the planet's major population centers. What appeared on screen defied everything they thought they knew about planetary development. The cities weren't built around markets or government centers like normal civilizations. Instead, massive weapons factories formed the heart of every major settlement. Enormous manufacturing complexes stretched for kilometers, their smokestacks reaching toward the sky like metallic forests. Transportation networks were designed to move military equipment, not civilian goods. Look at this pattern, Yunji said, highlighting sections of the largest city. Residential areas are built around the weapons plants. The workers live next to their factories. It's like their entire society exists to support weapons production. So Young pulled up more intercepted communications, these ones from what appeared to be government channels. They have entire departments dedicated to something. They called defense contracting. But Commander, they're not defending against anyone. They're building offensive capabilities that exceed anything in our military archives. The tactical officer Jin Ho, who had been quietly analyzing the weapons signatures they were detecting, finally looked up from his console. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly. "Commander," he said quietly, "I've been comparing their energy signatures to our weapons database. Some of these facilities are producing armaments that could threaten our main fleet. Not just individual ships, Commander, the entire fleet." The bridge fell into stunned silence as the full scope of their discovery became clear. They hadn't found a primitive world ripe for conquest. They had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than any enemy the Valaxian Empire had ever faced. This planet had turned warfare into an industry, not just military production for defense, but weaponry as their primary economic activity. An entire world devoted to creating instruments of destruction with an efficiency that made their own military look primitive by comparison. Commander Hyun-woo stared at the data streaming across his screens, realizing they might have made the most dangerous discovery in Valaxian history. Below them spun a world that had perfected something no civilization should ever perfect, the art of making war itself profitable. Commander Hyun-woo spent 2 sleepless nights staring at the data streams from Earth. Every piece of information painted a picture that seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Part of him wanted to retreat immediately and report back to Valaxian command. But another part, the military strategist who had earned his rank through careful planning, needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. "We need to test their capabilities," he finally announced during the morning briefing. "All this data means nothing if we don't know how they actually fight." Lieutenant Yoon-ji looked uncomfortable with the idea. "Commander, their production numbers suggest they might be more dangerous than we initially thought. Perhaps we should observe them longer before making contact." But Hyun-woo had made his decision. Years of successful conquests had taught him that the best way to understand an enemy was to provoke a small response. A quick strike, a minor engagement, just enough to see how they reacted under pressure. It was standard Valaxian doctrine. "Junior Lieutenant Woo Jin," he called to the young officer manning the secondary tactical station. Woo Jin was eager, ambitious, and exactly the kind of officer who would follow orders without questioning them too much. "Yes, Commander?" Woo Jin snapped to attention, his eyes bright with anticipation. This was his first major mission, and he was desperate to prove himself. "Take your squadron and conduct a reconnaissance raid on one of their outer installations," Hyun-woo ordered. "Make it look like a pirate attack. Nothing too aggressive, just enough to see how they respond to a minor threat." Woo Jin's face lit up with excitement. "Which target, Commander?" Hyun-woo studied the tactical displays showing Earth's local space. Several installations orbited the planet and its moons, most appearing to be simple mining or research stations. One caught his attention, a moderate-sized facility orbiting the moon they called Europa. The energy signatures were minimal, suggesting basic operations. "There," he pointed to the Europa station. "It appears to be a mining operation. Minimal defenses, civilian workers, perfect for a quick probe." Within an hour, Woo Jin had assembled his strike force. 3 fast attack ships, lightly armed and designed for quick raids, the kind of vessels pirates might use for harassment attacks on remote stations. It was perfect cover for their real mission. "Remember," Hyun-woo transmitted to Woo Jin as the small fleet prepared to depart, "this is just a test. Get in, cause some minor damage, observe their response, and get out. We need information, not a battle." "Understood, Commander," Woo Jin replied, his voice crackling with static as his ships moved away from the main fleet. Beginning approach to target, Hyun-woo settled back in his command chair, expecting to watch a routine engagement. In his experience, mining stations were defended by security guards with basic weapons, if they were defended at all. The civilians would panic, maybe fire a few desperate shots, then either surrender or flee. Standard pattern for dozens of worlds. Target. In sight, Wu Jin reported 20 minutes later. Looks exactly like intelligence suggested. Basic mining platform. A few cargo ships, maybe 200 workers total. Beginning attack run. The main screen showed a distant view of the engagement as Wu Jin's ships approached the Europa station. From this distance, it looked like any other minor military action. 3 small ships moving toward a stationary target. Initiating assault on civilian target, Wu Jin announced, his voice confident and controlled. First pass beginning now. But something went wrong almost immediately. What the... Wu Jin's voice suddenly changed, confusion replacing confidence. Commander, these aren't normal mining tools. The equipment is transforming. On the screen, Hyunwoo watched in growing alarm as the simple mining station began to change. Structures that had appeared to be ore processors were rotating and extending, revealing weapon barrels underneath. Cargo ships were jettisoning false hulls, exposing military-grade armor and weapon systems. Commander, Wu Jin's voice crackled. Through the communications array, panic beginning to seep through his military training. These civilians are shooting back with weapons I don't recognize. Their response time is impossibly fast. The tactical display showed Wu Jin's ships taking heavy fire from multiple directions. What should have been a simple raid against confused miners had turned into a coordinated military response. The civilian workers were moving with the precision of elite soldiers. They're not miners, Wu Jin transmitted, his voice now tight with fear. These people are military personnel. The entire station is a disguised military base. Hyunwoo gripped his chair as he watched the engagement unfold. This wasn't how raids were supposed to go. Civilian stations were supposed to be helpless against military attack craft. They weren't supposed to fight back with professional coordination and superior firepower. Wu Jin, abort the mission, he ordered. Return to the fleet immediately. Trying to disengage, Commander, Wu Jin replied, his transmission growing weaker. But they're tracking our movements. How are they tracking us? Their scanning technology is more advanced than ours. The next few minutes were a nightmare of garbled transmissions and desperate evasion attempts. Through the static, Hyunwoo could hear Wu Jin's crew shouting reports about weapon impacts and system failures. They're using some kind of energy weapon that passes right through our shields, Wu Jin reported, his voice barely audible over alarms and explosions. Commander, we're losing power to... The transmission cut to dead silence. For long minutes, the bridge of the Crimson Dawn waited in tense quiet. Finally, a single blip appeared on their scanners. One ship, badly damaged and moving slowly, limped back toward the fleet. When Wu Jin's surviving vessel finally docked, the damage was shocking. Hull plates were melted and twisted by weapons the Valaxians didn't recognize. Scorch marks covered. The ship's surface in patterns that suggested incredibly precise targeting. Wu Jin himself was barely conscious when they pulled him from his ruined command chair. His final report, delivered through gritted teeth in the medical bay, was terrifyingly simple. Commander, he whispered, they weren't miners. They were all soldiers. Every single one of them knew exactly how to fight. The silence in space was broken by the sudden appearance of human ships. What the Valaxians had thought were simple cargo vessels now transformed before their eyes. Metal panels slid away to reveal massive weapon arrays. Engine signatures that had seemed weak suddenly blazed with military-grade power. The trap had been perfectly set. Commander Hyunwoo stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The dots, representing human vessels, had multiplied across his screen. Ships that hadn't been there moments before now surrounded his entire fleet. His tactical officer's hands trembled as he tried to make sense of the readings. The communication array crackled to life. Static filled the bridge before clearing to reveal a human face. The woman on screen had sharp features and eyes that seemed to look right through the Valaxian commander. Her uniform was clean and professional, but there was something dangerous in her expression. "I am Captain Minji of the Earth Defense Consortium," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the void between their ships. "We've been watching your fleet for weeks." The words hit Commander Hyunwoo like a physical blow. Weeks. They had been observed for weeks without knowing it. All their careful planning, their stealth approach, their supposed surprise attack had been nothing more than a performance for human eyes. Captain Minji continued speaking, and each word made the situation clearer and more terrifying. Your test raid on our outer colony was quite informative. We learned a lot about your tactics, your weapons, and most importantly, your intentions. The Valaxian bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Their commander had assured them that the raid had been a complete success. They had struck fast, gathered intelligence, and escaped without the humans ever knowing who had attacked them. At least, that's what they had believed. I'm going to explain something that might help you understand your situation better, the human captain said, leaning forward slightly in her chair. Every human child learns about warfare before they learn to read. We study battle tactics the way other species study mathematics. We don't just build weapons and ships. We think like weapons. We are weapons. Her words carried a weight that made the bridge atmosphere feel heavy. The Valaxian crew had encountered many species in their expansion across the galaxy. Some were peaceful traders who offered no resistance. Others put up brief fights before surrendering. None had ever spoken with such quiet confidence about their ability to wage war. You see, Captain Minji continued, humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've perfected the art of war through countless conflicts on our own world. When we finally reached the stars, we brought all that knowledge with us. The tactical display showed more human ships appearing. The Valaxian fleet was now completely surrounded. What had started as a hunting expedition had become a trap with them as the prey. We've been preparing for species like yours since we first left Earth, the human captain explained. We knew that eventually someone would look at our colonies and see easy targets. Someone would think that humans were just another peaceful species ready to be conquered. Commander Hyunwoo found his voice finally. What do you want from us? Captain Minji's smile was sharp and cold. I want to give you a choice, Commander. You can retreat now, return to your empire, and warn them to stay away from human space. Tell them exactly what happened here. Make sure they understand that attacking humans was the worst mistake they could make. The commander waited for the alternative, though he was beginning to suspect what it might be. Or, the human captain continued, you can refuse to leave. You can try to fight us. And when we're finished with your fleet, we'll send what's left back to your empire as a message. A demonstration of what happens when someone threatens human colonies. Around the Valaxian fleet, more human ships continued to appear. The stealth technology was beyond anything the Valaxians had encountered. Ships materialized from empty space, as if they had been there all along, just waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The weapons on the human vessels began to power up. Energy readings spiked across the Valaxian sensors. The sound of charging weapon systems created a low, threatening hum that somehow transmitted through space and vibrated through the hulls of the Valaxian ships. Commander Hyunwoo looked around his bridge. His crew members were all watching him, waiting for orders. The confidence they had shown during the journey to human space was completely gone. Fear had replaced it, and he couldn't blame them. The human captain was still waiting for his answer. Her expression hadn't changed, but somehow the threat in her words seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. The Valaxian commander realized that everything his empire believed about humans was wrong. They weren't a weak species ripe for conquest. They were predators who had been watching and waiting, allowing the Valaxians to reveal their intentions before springing their trap. The choice was simple, even if accepting it meant admitting complete failure. The silence on the Valaxian bridge stretched for what felt like forever. Commander Hyunwoo stared at the human captain's face on his screen, knowing that his next words would determine whether his crew lived or died. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Around his fleet, human warships waited with their weapons, charged. The energy readings were unlike anything in Valaxian military databases. These weren't just advanced weapons, they were instruments of destruction that spoke of a species that had spent generations perfecting the art of war. We choose to leave, Commander Hyunwoo finally said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. We will return to our space and deliver your message. Captain Minji nodded slowly. Smart choice, Commander. But before you go, I want you to understand something. This isn't mercy. This is a business decision. Dead enemies can't spread warnings. The human ships began to power down their weapons, but they remained in position. The message was clear. The humans would allow the retreat, but they would be watching every moment until the Valaxian fleet was gone. As his ships prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Commander Hyunwoo made one final decision. He launched a small message drone toward the human fleet. Inside was a complete tactical analysis of what had just happened, along with his personal assessment of human capabilities. The jump to hyperspace felt different this time. Instead of the excitement of heading toward conquest, there was only the bitter taste of complete defeat. The Valaxian Empire's expansion had hit a wall they could never break through. The journey back to Valaxian space gave Commander Hyunwoo time to prepare. His report. How do you explain to an empire that has conquered dozens of worlds that they had just encountered a species they could never defeat? How do you tell military leaders who pride themselves on tactical superiority that they had been outmaneuvered before the battle even began? The High Council chamber fell silent when Commander Hyunwoo finished his report. The assembled military leaders and politicians stared at him in disbelief. Some questioned whether he was exaggerating. Others demanded details about human technology and tactics. To recommend immediate classification of Sol System as Forbidden Zone, Commander Hyunwoo concluded. Species designation, Apex Predator. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members argued for gathering more intelligence. Others suggested forming alliances with other species to overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers. A few even proposed trying diplomatic contact. Commander Hyunwoo listened to all the suggestions before speaking again. With respect, council members, you weren't there. You didn't see how easily they turned our hunting expedition into their trap. These humans don't just fight wars. They think about warfare in ways we can't even imagine. Within days, the Empire issued galaxy-wide warnings to all species under their influence. The Sol System was to be avoided at all costs. Trade routes that passed near human space were rerouted. Military patrols were pulled back to create a buffer zone, but the humans had different plans entirely. Ships began appearing along Valaxian. Trade routes within weeks. These weren't military vessels preparing for war. They were merchant ships carrying cargo and displaying Earth registry codes. The humans had come to trade. Captain Do-hyun commanded one of these merchant vessels. His ship, the Peaceful Trader, looked nothing like the warships that had surrounded the Valaxian fleet. It appeared to be exactly what its name suggested, a peaceful trading vessel looking for business opportunities. His first contact with Valaxian merchants happened at a neutral trading station between empires. The Valaxians were nervous, expecting some kind of trick or trap. Instead, Captain Do-hyun simply opened his cargo bays and began displaying his merchandise. The weapons on display were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They were efficient, deadly, and surprisingly affordable. But more importantly, they came with something no other arms dealer offered: detailed instruction manuals and training programs. Why fight wars when you can buy better weapons? Captain Do-hyun explained to his first customers. His sales pitch was simple but revolutionary. Instead of spending decades developing military technology, species could simply purchase human designs. The concept spread faster than anyone expected. Within months, human arms dealers had established trading posts throughout the galaxy. They weren't conquering territory or demanding tribute. They were simply offering superior products at competitive prices. The galaxy's balance of power shifted overnight, but not in the way anyone had predicted. Species that had been locked in stalemates for generations suddenly found themselves with access to weapons that could tip the scales. Old conflicts were resolved quickly, but new ones began just as fast. The humans watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. They had discovered something more profitable than conquest. They had turned warfare itself into an industry, and every species in the galaxy had become their customers. The Valaxian Empire found itself in a strange position. They had discovered humanity intending to conquer them, only to realize that the humans had no interest in taking their territory. Instead, the humans were content to sell them the tools to defend themselves against other threats. The universe learned a fundamental truth about humans that day. They didn't wage war for territory, resources, or even glory. They had transformed the very concept of conflict into the most profitable business model in known space. Every battle fought with human weapons generated revenue. Every peace treaty signed created demand for newer, better arms. The humans had achieved something no conquering empire ever had. They had made themselves indispensable to every species in the galaxy, not through force, but through simple business sense.